Okay, so in this video, we are going to get a list of users that we have stored in the database right now, which I believe is only maybe 2 users. I'm also going to restructure our user reducer a little bit. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap all of what we have so far in an object called current user. And so that's all going to come inside here. And then we're going to have a users array. And that's going to be a list of all of the users in our database. And so right now, this will probably break the app. Kind of, yeah, so we don't have anything there because our data structure has now changed. But let's not worry about that right now. What I want to do is I'm going to go into this navbar component. The navbar component only mounts once in this app. And so I'm going to use that as my initial trigger for making the call to the API. So I've got that set up right now. The way that I like to build my API, I like to, as I mentioned in a previous video, make it a class that I pull in. And that way I can just call the method and then pass in a callback, and I can do what I need to with that. And so I am calling this method of get all users. I'm passing in this method as a callback, so that when I get the response from the server, I then am calling this function and I'm getting the users from the response. And so you can see I've got this console log, setting users and app component users. And so you can see it there. It's actually the navbar component. And there it is. You can see it takes just a few milliseconds to get a response from the server. So I've got 2 users here. And so what we want to do is we want to take those users and save them to Redux. And so this is where dispatch comes in. And so in our navbar component, we're also going to say import, caps locks is still on, import connect from React Redux, just like we did before. Except now, down here, we're going to use the dispatch methods. We're going to say const map dispatch to props. That takes in an argument that we're going to call dispatch. Again, we're returning an object. That's really important to remember, that we're returning an object. And then from there, this is where we create our methods. And so I want to say set, we're just going to call it set all users. So this is a method, a function, and we're going to pass in the users. And then first, let's just make sure that this kind of works. We're going to say console log the users inside dispatch. Let's just kind of make sure that this is working more or less. And so the way that we attach these props is, again, we say connect. We've got to wrap this component. Now, if you remember, the first argument was that map state to props. That's how we get props. That's the first argument. The second argument is actually dispatching props. And so we're going to say null for our first argument, and then for our second one, map dispatch to props. So now, because we have this passed in, we should have access to this as a prop. And so I can say, this maybe isn't the best naming convention, but now I can say this.props.set all users. Let me go ahead and delete this. And what I would expect to happen is to see this console log. Let me go ahead and pass in the users as well, just to make sure that I've got them. Save, and there it is. So that's it, already saved, like being passed in as props. That method is. And now I've got the details about each user. So now what I can do is I can actually send that to our store. And so the way that we do that for now, we're going to refactor this in later videos. But the way we're going to do that right now is we're going to create an object called action. We have to give it a type. and we're going to say set all users. It's common practice to do like all caps because this is a constant, all caps, and then use underscores in between the words. Set all users, and then we're going to take the users as a property. So you could do this. This works, but the better way to do it is since they're the same, the property and the value of the same name, just set it as users. And then here you say dispatch action. So now I can go in here. In this reducer, in this switch statement, I've got this action.type. And so what we're listening for is the case of this type of set all users. So if I go in here and I say case set all users, now I'm saying what do I want to do in this case. And so let's just make sure that this is working first. We're going to say console log running inside the switch statement. And then let's go ahead and console logger action 2. I would expect to have an object that looks just like this object. So let's see if that's working. Running inside the switch statement, there it is. The type, set all users, and the users as well. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is take, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Take those users and assign them here. What we can't do is this. We can't say initial state.users equals action.users. The better thing to do is use object.assign. That helps with having immutability, which is always a good thing to have whenever you are managing your state. And so we're going to say return object.assign. And so the first thing we're doing is passing in an empty object. This is creating a brand new object. So it's not being passed by reference. It's not referring to any other object that we have available to us beforehand. So it's a brand new object. And then the second argument will be state. So this is referring to whatever our current state is of our user reducer. And then now we're going to pass in an object of users as action.users. And so that should, I would expect, update this to be the array that we have here attached to the action. So let's go ahead and delete this console log statement. Let's run this and see if it works. The app is refreshing. Go into Redux, go into state, and there they are. Right there on users, I have both users attached to it. So now, because of that, I can go into my user list component. And here, instead of rendering it this way, what I'm going to do is, let me comment this out real fast. We're going to instead pass in all of the users. And so we can say state.userReducer.users. So now I have that available to me under props. So now I can say users.map user index. And then here I can return this same info that we had here. I will need to wrap this in a single component, or a single element, I'm sorry. Okay, and then from here, if you remember from an older video, you have to pass in the index whenever you're mapping over something. That's how React keeps track of its virtual, of where it is, where things are in the virtual DOM. And so I would expect that this would work. I don't think these users have a bio right now. But I think other than that, I would expect that this might work. And there it is. Yeah, it's working. So if you notice, when I refresh right away, right at the beginning, it doesn't have the data yet because it's making the call to the server. But then once it comes back, it updates it. And then there we've got it. So we've got 2 users. The next thing we've got to do is talk about how we're going to create new users. We'll do that in the next video.